Such an obedient audience. Oh my God, this is like weird. This never happens. I think, okay, you guys are choosing to stand. That's cool. Feel free to take a seat if you want. You're cool to stand. I'm standing, so it's all right. Welcome, everyone. Happy Creative Mornings. We are back in action after a couple months off. Orr Street said, hey, why don't you come back? And so we went ahead and did that. There's a lot of familiar faces here, but there's also a lot of new faces. So I'll kind of give a brief overview of Creative Mornings, and then we'll go through our normal spiel. So Creative Mornings started in Brooklyn, New York, and it's expanded into a global organization. So there are groups just like this meeting all over the world today, usually on Fridays during the month, but there's a few today that we'll see, to talk about a monthly theme. So this month's theme is, got my clicker now, perspective. Yeah, each chapter gets to pick a theme. I think our pick is in like 2029 or something like that. This month's theme, perspective, was chosen by the Fargo chapter, and the art was done by Fred Gay Raremo. So each month, headquarters gives me like a little blurb to read about perspective, kind of just put us get our minds right. So every creative act is an attempt to share a unique perspective on some slice of the world. What you see and how you see it shapes your beliefs. So, what's your point of view? Remember, looking at a problem from multiple angles generates more possible solutions. So, change your perspective and you can change your world. So, let's give it up one time for True False, by the way. Just wrap that up. Great event. I heard that's like someone said, and I overheard this at a bar, so whether or not it's true, I don't know, but it's the second largest documentary film festival in the world. Is that, can anyone confirm that? Yes. Yeah, that's wild. That's crazy when you think about it like that. Did anybody make it to some shows? We have some volunteers. Anybody that volunteered? Yeah, give it up for the volunteers. Yeah. I only made it to one. Ibelin, yes. I guess some people saw Ibelin as well. Yeah, that was great. I'm not gonna spoil it. But one thing I learned from that is I didn't realize the power of community online and in these virtual games. I had no idea. I mean, the story, again, I'm not gonna spoil it, but people just have like whole communities or guilds that, they make lifelong friendships. I mean, it changes people's lives. So that film is about a lot more than that. But that's just something I don't know. I just kind of like, I didn't realize that was a thing. So in the vein of, see what I did? In the vein of perspective, I would like to bring up this icebreaker. So we do an icebreaker every month where, we do that. And we ask for volunteers. And this month we're talking about what made you recently say, I didn't really thought about that one. So I know we have some kind of pre-baked answers in the audience, but anyone like to participate in the icebreaker?
Lauren's all nervous right now, but I saw this on Instagram the other day, and at first I was like, I have no idea. And literally washing dishes last night, I thought about, we watched Cuomo and Tucker Carlson interview, and two polar opposites, and I'm going, how's this happening? Like, how are we not fighting each other? And the way Cuomo talked about how opposite he is of all that person's thoughts, but still we still have to sit down and have conversation without fighting and all those things. And the way he approached it was like, I never really thought about it that way. And so it was kind of refreshing to see two people opposite sit down in a room and have a conversation. And the perspectives.
Yeah.
The theme, like, wow, did I do okay?
I like to think.
She got nervous, really nervous. She's like, no.
I like to think there's some undertones of. I mean, we all know, what's coming up towards the end of the year. It's going to be consuming our lives, I'm sure. But yeah, in the little blurb, it's like looking at a problem from multiple angles generates more possible solutions. So change your perspective, and you can change the world. It's like I feel like it's alluding to like, hey, yeah, maybe we need to reach across the aisle a little bit. But we can save that for another time. Who else has I don't really.
I have another one. It was like a true false movie that I saw, Daughters. I don't know if anyone else saw that, but it was about a dance thing that got put on in prisons for dads to have a daddy-daughter dance.
Oh.
And the statistic at the end of the movie was that 95% of people that participate in this program don't end up going back to prison. Because a lot of dads were saying that they are in and out of prison, like 6 months at a time, and that was just really like, and I thought about it for a moment, and
Yeah.
it just changed my perspective on simple, something like a dance with your daughters, like maybe, that.
Yeah, it was called Daughters.
Yeah.
Daughters.
Amazing.
Yeah, check it out. Daughters. That's really cool. That's super interesting. Let's get one more. Let's get one more because I want to get to the speakers soon. Here we go.
I don't know why TikTok served up a gardener to my feeds yesterday, but it must have known something I didn't, because the creator was talking about how when she plants seeds, she doesn't think, when they don't come up, she doesn't think, gosh, the seed was bad. These were bad. What was it? Did I buy a bad lot? She said instead she thinks, what conditions were wrong with the soil, or what was it with the lighting? And it made me realize that why don't we extract that out to our children and so I think I'll talk with my therapist about that more.
Yeah, that's always good when you're out in the world and you're like, ooh, I'm gonna bookmark that to talk to Tim about. Yeah, right. Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. We also did post this on social media, as Steven said. Feel free to drop a comment if you'd like to share. But we're going to keep moving here. So one really cool thing about Creative Mornings, something that kind of came out of the pandemic, but something that kept going, is this thing called field trips. So if you RSVP'd for today's event, which you all did, right? You now have a Creative Mornings account, and so you can go on these field trips for free. A lot of them are educational, or it's just somebody like demoing how to do a certain thing. They're pretty cool. So yeah, creativemornings.com/field trips. Yeah, pretty cool stuff. They're live, they're on demand. There's a huge gallery now. So like I said, Creative Mornings is a global chapter. I hadn't updated this slide in a long time, and it was like 234 chapters. Now there's 238 chapters worldwide, and a lot of them, like I said, are meeting today. So you can see, we got Venice, Barcelona. There was one, where is it? A drone photographer in Virginia Beach. That's pretty cool, talking about perspective, bird's eye view. I like it. Columbia, yay! All the way to Kyoto, Kansas City. They're like meeting right now, probably, right? Like, it's pretty cool, right? All talking about perspective, but from their own perspective. I'm going to finish up here, but if you are interested in volunteering, we're still looking for volunteers to help out. I know I've talked to some of you that are here today about helping out. Creative Mornings is, we aren't actually a nonprofit entity, but globally it's a nonprofit entity. I'm not making any money. Bethany and Tony, we paid them a little bit, but they're not really making much off of this. And so this is really driven by volunteer superpower, just like True False. So if you're interested in helping out, even if it's just getting here a little early and helping set up chairs or something like that, the more help the merrier. So feel free to reach out to us on social media, or you can just email Columbia@creativemornings.com. Thank you to Orr Street. Orr Street has been an awesome host to us. Yeah, they've literally opened their doors and let us just use. I mean, that projector's theirs, all these seats are theirs, and so shout out to Orr Street. They've got a ton of upcoming events all on their Facebook, so give that a look. But yeah, definitely want to give out shout out to Orr Street. I think I've been showing this slide for a couple months now. I think we're bringing friends. It feels like we're making friends and we're bringing friends, and that's great. But I encourage you to continue to do it. That's the best way that we grow as a chapter, and it just makes these events more fun. You know, the more people we have here. So bring a friend, make a friend, swap digits at the end of this. You know, that's what we're here for, community. So I am going to go ahead. So every month we read the Creative Mornings Manifesto before we announce our speakers. I'm going to go ahead and read it today just so we can get going. Everyone is creative. A creative life requires bravery in action, honesty, and hard work. We are here to support you, celebrate you, and encourage you to make the things you love. We believe in the power of community. We believe in giving it now! We believe in face-to-face connections and learning from others and hugs and high fives. We bring together people who are driven by passion and purpose, confident that they will inspire one another and inspire change in neighborhoods and cities around the world. Everyone is welcome. Isn't that good? Oh. All right, so I'm done, but I'd like to bring up Lauren, if she wouldn't mind introing our speakers today.
It's so awesome to see such a beautiful big group here today, celebrate spring, and this awesome theme that we have today. So our theme is perspective. As our speaker team got together to meet, which that's another plug to join us as a volunteer because we're a fun group, we were just thinking that perspective was begging for a duo. Like, it needed to have a duo to talk about this rich topic. And it was unanimous. There wasn't even a thought. It was like all of us were like, it's gotta be Bethany and Tony Irons. It just has to be them. So I first met Bethany in 2017 when I was a brand new baby PhD student at the University of Missouri, and she showed me the ropes through that whole process. And through that, I was introduced to her husband, Tony, and I reached out, and emphatically, they both were like, yes. And then you were very excited. You were like, yes. So Bethany is currently an assistant professor and chair of the visual communications at Stevens College. And Tony is an artist, very talented artist and photographer himself, and an associate director of Stopgap projects here in Columbia. And when I tell you that you are going to be treated to so many intersections of perspective in their lives and careers, I just can't wait for you all to experience that. So without further ado, Bethany and Tony Irons.
Thank you so much. All right, so perspective, what is it, right? It's a way of seeing, a way of being, a way of doing. It is a point of view, right? And typically, Tony and I give our point of view and perspective without anybody asking or wanting it. So thank you all for being here, what I am assuming is willingly today. So yeah, our perspective on things, Tony and I are very similar in our overall belief system. And I would say that while, you know, getting from point A to point B is very different for both of us, we basically have the same vision with life, and our perspectives are very similar. So we'll talk about that. And so when we think of perspective, we think of kind of maybe a more global version of perspective, and what does it mean to see things through our, you know, limited scope. And so today you'll hear from me, my limited scope, right? And of course, from Tony as well. And one thing about me is that I am really interested in color. Like I am totally infatuated with color. And so you'll probably see pops of that throughout my work here today. But I love color because it can really impact your mood, even our physiology, our body, our safety, right? We rely on color for our safety and also accessibility, being able to read things, right? Color conveys meaning, and it also can influence our buying decisions, right? And one of the things that I really love about color is that, which I'll talk more about in a second here, but is that color, when you take like shapes of color, fields of color, and get in like really close to an image, fields of color combined together start to create something that looks like a thing, right? And those things carry symbolic meaning to them. And those things that I'm really interested in, and that Tony's really interested in as well, are the everyday things, the things that we share time with essentially every single day. You know, the Campbell soup kit, the Purell bottle has a brand new meaning to us now. But yeah, the everyday, right? And so the boring, the mundane, the everyday, it's really a reflection of our culture, but it can also give us some truth about life, right? We are all co-creating this experience every day through those everyday experiences and those everyday objects. Okay, so this is where I'm going to require a little bit of participation. Lauren, you know the deal, BTS. All right, so I'm going to ask you all what is going on in this image, okay? So I want you to look closely, as close as you can. Feel free to get up too if you want to look closer at it. But notice everything that there is to notice here. I'm going to ask you in a second about it. So, what is going on in this image? And very literally, what do you see?
There's a violin.
Oh! There's that shared perspective. Okay, there's a violin, yes, great. All right, what else?
I see reflections.
Okay, reflections, yes.
The skull.
The skull, yes. We see a skull. What else?
It feels a little bit like decay of some sort.
Okay, great. So what do you see that makes you think of decay?
The overturned glass that, I can't tell if that's a nut or apart, because things seem in a bit of disarray, like something's happened and this is the aftermath.
Okay, yep. So decay, disarray.
It seems like the violin doesn't have a fret, like a strings on the fret, unless I just can't see them. They're stripped.
There is a, but yes, that would be very interesting, yeah. So, thinking about like if this didn't have, or that you can't really see. Yeah, what else?
You can see the painter in the reflection of the sphere, the artist.
Yes, okay, so, you see in that mirror ball, the artist, right? And this is Peter Klaus. This is a Vanitas still life painting, and that's him in the reflection. And with this particular genre of painting, like this was made in circa 1625, but this particular genre of painting, Dutch still life, was really all about life, death, the transience of life, the sort of meaningless of all of these vanity objects that we spend all of our time with. You know, in some ways, the painter sort of extends their life forever, as long as this digital image exists, through this painting, right? And so I kind of took this idea of Vanitas into my work right at the beginning of the pandemic. So this is March 29th, 2020. And one thing that we all really had to get acclimated to was isolation, right? And I know that I'm not alone in that, one way that I kind of broke out of that isolation was through Instagram and through like digital means, right? And so I would share, there's Louie, our French bulldog. And so I would share, you know, my day-to-day life, like my everyday experiences through these Instagram stories. And this was one way to sort of, it was like a call into a void, right? A future that was very uncertain. It was a way to where I could kind of regain some control over my circumstances. And this really took shape in a work of art that or like a series that I started. And so, you know, thinking back to art history class, right, and Vanita's still life paintings, how I had learned about it, didn't think too much about it, but then it reemerged later on in life. And so I would take these little like snippets of my everyday life and embed them into these works. Anybody part of the bread making phenomenon? Yeah, okay. And so one thing about this type of work is that I realize you have to care about everything. You have to care about every single thing that's in that image because it's all symbolic, it's all meaningful, it's all a part of how people interpret things, right? And so one, I guess, lesson that I learned for myself is throughout this process is not only a way to sort of technically make this work, but also a philosophy for living during this time, is that you can't look at the big picture, you have to focus on the small, manageable parts. And the rest will work itself out. And so what I mean by that as far as like technically is that when you zoom into some of these images, it looks like just a blob that doesn't really make too much sense, right? But then when you zoom out from it, you get a new perspective on things, right? You essentially, that little blob is one important part, light, shadow, color of a bigger whole, right? And so when I say it's like you have to care about everything, you have to care about the shadows that are made. For pretty much all of these still lifes, I would, you know, set up an actual still life from objects that we had around the house, and I would take a photo of it, use a photo reference, and do these things digitally through either Photoshop or Illustrator. And so I would zoom into the photo like super, super close to try to really understand, like, okay, where does the light hit? Where does the shadow hit? And you really have to care about, like, for instance, how does the text sort of flow and fold over the bag, right? And when I think about, like, breaking things up into manageable chunks as well, one thing that I thought about is how, you know, I'm trained as a painter, and so, you know, I've done a lot of underpainting, and thinking about, like, how the shape of things, right? And blocking stuff out into, again, like manageable chunks. Because if I just went in and was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do, this is what it's gonna look like, and try to, you know, do all parts of it at once, that's just not the way my mind works. But yeah, chunking things out and really like finding the form of it, and really investigating the object itself was something that I really enjoyed. I also really enjoyed how like some of these objects started becoming almost like personified. So like this little stick of butter having an existential crisis. But all in all, so here's kind of my year of 2020 through all of the chaos and all of the uncertainty. Like this was one thing that I could always count on. And obviously I can always count on you too, Tony. But this is one thing that like I would get up at 8 a.m. to work on it, and I would work, you know, all day, and sometimes for like 15 hours at a time, and you know, forgetting to eat and that sort of thing. But this allowed my mind to go somewhere else other than just despair, right? But one thing that I will say that hopefully you don't see in those is all the failures that led up to it. And like I've made hundreds, and I am not like exaggerating, hundreds of drawings and paintings that I would deem like a failure, right? I would not show them. today. But even in these, there's things that I would change, right? But you really can't be creative and not fail. And you know, we could take that term failure to mean like a mistake, but it's not a mistake. Nothing's a mistake, it's all like a learning experience, right? And to be creative is to be vulnerable, to be okay with being wrong, and to be okay with failing, because you're always experimenting. And along that same line, to be creative is to really build empathy for yourself and for others. And so one thing that I, you know, after like years of doing these super detailed representational works, I needed to kind of let go of representation. And so for the past year, I've been doing these little sketchbook illustrations, and I have no plan going into them. The only constraints I have are, you know, the page, and I have a limited color palette that you'll see over there that I'm using. But this was really important for me as a creative person to be able to go in and do something without a plan and just ending when it feels right. And so I've had a lot of fun with these. But I feel like these have also really helped me in terms of how I make, so here's some of those, and how I make my other work. And so in thinking about like new and inventive ways to sort of place objects, and this is really like an extension of that Benita's Still Life series, but literally from a new perspective, right, top down. Yeah, and I feel like the sketchbook series has really helped me with thinking about like composition and layout, even in like publication design work. So yeah, to grow as a creator, I would say also you have to continually broaden your perspective, right? Just the fact that you all are here today, right? You're taking part in that. And you know, we all have our one sort of limited scope of our perspective and our experience. But to broaden your perspective can really mean to like look through things through the eyes of other people, and that can be tremendously valuable. And so back in 2017, around that area of time, I started Pleat Gallery, and this was at a time when like I had moved from Columbia for a job to Omaha, and I was feeling very isolated at the time, and I really needed more of an artist community. And little did I know just how important Instagram would be to me later on in life. But I curated 50 shows with 100 artists just online, and this, what I would essentially do, you know, putting out a call for art. They would like send me their work and send me like their statement, and it was a really important and valuable practice for me to go in and really see like, okay, how do people describe their work? What does it look like? How is this connected to this person? And it was just kind of like a big map that, or like a puzzle to solve. And so I would curate 2 people per show, and the artists were tremendously generous with their time and energy, and they would also do these little virtual studio visits as well. And so at the time I did have a website for this, but you know, they would talk about their work, and you know, just listening to them and what they had to say, and then also like how the other artists they were paired with talked about their work, was just a really interesting practice for me. And even now that, you know, I don't do that anymore, I think that, you know, broadening your perspective through things like Pinterest, right, or Instagram, right, that's all really important for somebody to broaden their perspective and their scope of what's possible. So I use these on a daily basis. So yeah, perspective, a way of seeing, a way of being, doing, and a point of view, right? And I would say, just kind of to, before I hand it off to Tony here, thinking about that idea of something that, taking a small part of a greater whole, focusing on what you can control, isolating certain elements and then taking a step back and looking at the whole picture can be really, really helpful when trying to do any sort of creative endeavor. Because art is hard. It's hard to make stuff, and it is so easy to talk yourself out of making anything. And so if you can make shapes, right? Just go onto a canvas or on Illustrator or Photoshop, make a shape, and then what comes next? Write a sentence of a poem, right? And then what comes next? And so yeah, that's kind of my perspective. And now I'll hand it over to Tony.
Left is right, right is left, right? Nope. Right. Can everybody hear me okay? I have a really hard time with microphones, and when I drop them instantly and not in a good way. As Lauren mentioned, I'm the Associate Director at Stopgap Projects. I'm also a project manager at an insurance company. So you'll see some similarities in that here in a second. But Stopgap is an artist-run gallery in kind of a creative space that we've had for about 2 years. We found a little spot on Walnut and have just kind of built it over time. We've shown roughly 60 plus artists in 26 months that we've been around. And also we have 5 studio members, so those are, they come in, help us curate, set up and stuff like that. So if you want to check us out on First Fridays or anything like that, we're just right up the street on Walnut, next to room 38. So here's a shameless plug. We are not a nonprofit, but we do not earn a profit. So we use sites like Patreon, so if you're so inclined, head over to Stopgap Projects, subscribe, you'll get all the cool stuff. All right. So William Eggleston is one of my favorite photographers from a very early childhood on, and what he says is photography just gets us out of the house. So that really resonates with me. It's very, very interesting from his perspective. I think there's probably 4 elements to like what I focus on or what I try to practice on when I'm thinking about photography, when I'm thinking about art. One is control. Then we have efficiency, perfectionism, and a little bit of embarrassment tucked in there. So the way that I break it down for me, 24% control, 31.3% efficiency, 32.3% perfectionism, and 12.5% embarrassment. I don't have the most recent data, so I don't necessarily know if this is accurate at this time. So let's talk about control and sometimes being controlling. So like, this is chaos, right? There's so much stuff going on in here. This is actually videos that I made while visiting Taiwan. And for those of you that either have been to Taiwan or know, it's a very small country that is very densely populated. Millions of people everywhere, all the time. There's so much sensory overload and so much stuff going on all at the same time that it's hard to focus on anything. So while I was there, that was kind of overwhelming to me and really caused my anxiety to skyrocket just walking around. So the images that I made while I was there, tried to wrangle and control that chaos. And so this is an example of a space that had a ton of people all the time. There's an amusement park right behind me. There's trucks and people walking through the scene all of the time. And what I did was just sit there and I waited. I just kept waiting. And I knew at some point I would get the chance to like really control that environment. Same way with this image. So these are made by, water and waves, but this area here is a constant stream of tourists all the time, just one after another. And so I sat there and waited for myself to understand the image and then try to control it. So right off camera, there's somebody here and somebody there. Very similar, very busy street. You can kind of see Taipei 101 over there, so it's on the outskirts of town. But this was a very similar situation where, I just had to sit and wait and do my best to like drown everything else out and control the situation. You can see the project manager coming out. Very similar, busy hotel at night, just waiting for the pool to calm down. So that's control. The next part of it that I think is efficiency. So I have a lot of thoughts on efficiency and other methods of wasting time. So this is a series that I started at work when I'm what's called an agile project manager, so agile methodologies of organization. The images here are a response to that kind of modern culture, taking a look at like everything that we do in an office space or what we're told to do in an office space to be productive and efficient. This series sort of challenges that. The ideas of Six Sigma, Lean, and Agile were basically brought in to reduce overproduction, transportation, and inventory. I think Toyota developed the Lean principles to improve their assembly lines. To further challenge these efficiency methods, I kind of went over the top and posted them to social media, cataloged them, identified them, and then put them all together in a series that would represent kind of a modern database structure. These are all things that people set on my desk at work. So people would walk by, we would have team events or fun things, and here I am trying to focus on stuff, and there's just stuff being set on my desk. So naturally, I have to pull out my phone and photograph it. The nice thing about this area is that you have a whiteboard, you got a little gray cube, you got a little gray desk. What is that? It's a perfect studio. So I started making these series just kind of on a whim to like poke fun at everything, and then I got consumed by it, which I think happens a lot in a sterile environment. Like your brain is allowed to like move around and like just start thinking about everything when you have nothing else to look at. So it's kind of the opposite of chaos or opposite of controlling. There's a Thanksgiving dinner. 7 disposable cameras for some reason. I guess they thought I liked photography. Read this if you want to be Instagram famous. I read it and it didn't work. So I started to kind of see a broader scope of these images and how they were like, oh man, I'm spending like, I don't know, 10 minutes a day, and then I go in and I edit the photographs and then I frame them in Photoshop on my phone, and before I know it, it's like, I've been doing this for an hour. So back to my original part of that, it's like they get posted to Instagram, so you have one singular image, then they get cataloged and they go under dry erase cube, hashtag dry erase cube, it's hashtag for fun. And just a fun fact about that, I think there's only one other dry erase cube on Instagram, and it's literally a cube made out of dry erase board. So, who goes? So I took it one step further of this whole efficiency model, and I actually published a book called dry erase cube. It's literally just the images from the cube, but it's that over-complicating, doing a very simple thing. That when we think about that, not really efficient. So that brings me to perfectionism, or something along those lines. So this is an image that I made in Palm Springs. I don't know if anybody's ever been to the Saguaro Hotel. It was an old Holiday Inn that is now brightly colored. So this is the actual scan that I scanned from a large format negative. So you can see the film frames there. And this is what I would start with. But as you zoom in to an image like this, and especially with film images that you've scanned, there's a lot of imperfections. It's not a perfect format like digital or anything like that. Like, you can get dust specks, hair, everything, that microscopic fuzz on your images. And so what I do is I really look closely at the image because I'm OCD and I really want it to be perfect. And then I get a little closer. And then I get closer still. But once we get that close to an image, we start to see stuff. It's not perfect. Yeah. It's really annoying. So I go there, and I am at 1,600 times the image that anybody would ever see. I print these images 4 by 6 feet, and so this is 1,600 times bigger than 4 by 6 feet. No one will ever see that shot. I did, and I fixed it. So this is the final image. This, to me, has every single little detail clean, the color's correct. It's just perfect. Or is it? Because when we think about perfection and efficiency and control, the perfectionism takes away that efficiency. It gives you the control, but how much time did you waste on being perfect when no one's ever going to know that you weren't? Which brings me to embarrassment. And maybe some guilt. Most of us say what everyone else says, or we say nothing at all, so we won't look like fools. Now, the good Midwesterner in me, falls right in line with this, with the, oh, yeah, no, for sure, whatever it is in a meeting. It's like, yep. So the embarrassing part of this for me is going back to the William Eggleston quote of photography just gets us out of the house. During the pandemic, housing, everybody wanted one. It was blowing up. So realtors were looking for photographers. For me, that was a safe space because people weren't at their houses. I could get in my car, get out of the house, and go photograph at home to be on Realtor or Zillow, something like that. As a conceptual photographer, going into a commercial market that is so I don't know, just disposable, or what I would say is just throwaway images, essentially, because they go there, they sell the house, and they're gone. I was kind of disappointed in myself for actually doing that. I felt like I was selling out or being a failure. But one thing I started to do while I was photographing these homes, I noticed everyone in the world has a beige sectional. But as I started going through this, I think the first one that I photographed, I was just set up the camera, shoot it, go to the next room, shoot it, go to the next room, and it was it wasn't really satisfying. But then I started thinking that I was understanding this, and even though it was kind of in the back of my mind, I started putting my own composition and lighting into these images and really overproducing the images. So by this time you can start to see that like I'm playing with shadows and having fun with reflections and different like orientations of things like that. And from there, it went to just crazy stuff. Like in the basement here where it's like, it goes back to that chaos thing where it's like, what is going on in this basement? There's so many things, you know, and then really taking a step back, taking a look at it, and then putting my own spin on the on the image. This is a image that's on Zillow, you know, and it's kind of cool to me actually. So I found myself starting to make images like I would make images. You know, just in a garage outbuilding or something like that. I'm sitting here worried about the angle of the electrical pole and how it works with the composition of the wire coming back down to the shed. And then you find just some really cool stuff in these basements. Just a quick side on this. There were no lights in the basement when you first came down there, and there was just one little like shadowy thing on this bison head, and so I went back upstairs and I was like, okay. I go back down there, and I found the light switch, thankfully, and I was like, all right, cool. So along the same lines of embarrassment, while Bethany was over there playing with her Windex bottles, I was stimulating the economy by buying guitar pedals and synthesizers. I had been in music for a while, way like 20 years ago, and I was just like, well, I got nothing else to do, let's pick it back up. So again, with everything in the efficiency models, control, like, I was trying to think about how I could do that sitting at home. So I started making little videos to go with my little songs, my cute little songs. And what that did, it still continued that process. And for me, the perfectionism took over again. And it's like, this is a 30-second song, but I'm producing 2-hour-long videos that go along with it. More and more, I find I want to be living in a big here and a long now. That's a quote by Brian Eno, famous like improvisational synth musician. But what he says here, a big here and a long now. It's really talking about living specifically in your moment, but also having a broader view and a foresight to the future kind of thing. Like, so you're here now, but what is now? How does it go out further? So also during the pandemic, we were all working remotely. I switched positions at my job and met another synthesizer enthusiast. And we started collaborating just via online, and then we would make these little videos. I would send him something, he would send me something back. But again, I started just kind of keep reworking these little clips. And again, this is rather chaotic, right? All these like things coming into play. And while I'm doing this, you know, I'm spending hours and hours trying to perfect them and neglecting other things, like being productive. And from there, to go over the top again, we formed a band called Big Here. And this is all on, you know, online, and we were doing some performances at Stopgap during this time. But the key here is that it was all improv. I'm not a trained musician. I don't know how to read music. I don't even know what half of these synthesizers do. And that was embarrassing to me. He's a classically trained musician. He's gonna know exactly what's going on, and I'm gonna be lost in the dark. So everything about that was embarrassing to me, and I didn't want to move forward with it. But thankfully, I overcame it a little bit. And so these are a couple of the performances that we did that were 2.5 hours long. No plan whatsoever. He would make a note, I would make a note, and that stuff. And through that process, I was able to like really control that embarrassment, and it made me feel like it was okay, and I could make a mistake. But then the perfectionism kicks in, and it's like, I don't want, and there's always that constant struggle. This is one that I left out of the first part, and that's empathy. And when I talk about all this, like, chaos, control, and everything, I often leave out empathy, but I think that is probably the most important aspect for me about working in any medium. Empathy begins with understanding life from another person's perspective. Nobody has an objective experience of reality. It's all through our own individual prisms. And I think that is really powerful. And Bethany mentioned a lot of that as well. I mean, you only have your perspective, and someone else is thinking that at the exact same time. They only have their perspective. And when those two meet or sometimes collide, there's something that happens there. And I think the most important part of that is having that empathetic response to that. And that can be anything from the way that we look at art, the way that we do our jobs every day. Someone comes in and microwaves salmon in the office, and you're like, that might be the only salmon they've had for the month, and that's really what they wanted for lunch, and you just have to have that. So, anyway, that is it for us. Thank you.
So ready. I was like, yeah, do you have any questions? But they already got it. They're ready to go. They all go ahead. They got it. Anybody has questions?
Do your worlds ever collide with art together? Okay, so we bought a house recently.
In an auction.
In an auction, so you can imagine the
From the 70s.
And I guess that's the first thing that comes to mind. It's been a little bit of a struggle to like actually get started and get to the aesthetic stuff. But that's where it's been really interesting to see like all the ways that we're very similar but different, and stuff. Like Tony, ask him anything about mid-century modern furniture and he'll like know like the designer and like when it was made and all this. And so I've really learned a lot from Tony in terms of like design and stuff like that. But that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Collaborating on where to put art in the house.
Yeah.
That has its challenges.
Yeah. Luckily, we kind of have a very similar aesthetic, but yeah.
Have you ever actually made art together though? Like, are you taking pictures of a Windex bottle?
No, I think the closest that we've had is like a collaboration. I was working on a series of images of large firework distributors, and then taking those and then really detailing the images of the actual fireworks. And you were, I'll let you talk.
No, it was a very like, it was a series of very much about like the 70s aesthetic, like 1970s, and so we called it like the Spirit of 76. This exhibition that we had together, hence the name of the fireworks distributor.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've collaborated on shows, basically having like a two-person show. But I think in order to keep our marriage intact, we're not going to collaborate on more than that. But yeah.
So I love your guys' talk. First, Bethany, I'm attentive to detail, so I love the tarot cards that I saw. I don't know if you're into that or not. Are you into that medium?
So I am not a tarot card expert by any means, but I put that in there as sort of a symbolic element of past, present, and future. And so if you couldn't tell by me shaking up there with my microphone. I have a tremendous amount of anxiety sometimes when it comes to like thinking about like living in the present and thinking about the future and worrying about the future. And so that element was a symbolic part of that particular work that was focused in on grounding exercises to sort of cope with anxiety and whatnot. So that this idea of like look at it's like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method of like look at five things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can taste, right? And so that element to me was more of a symbolic thing injected into there.
I'm really esoteric arts and the mystical. And then for you, sir, I'm a fellow control freak. So you were really speaking to me when you're talking about, that letting go and then kind of letting the creative process take you along. But for other control freaks like us, what are some tips that you could give, if you have any, to kind of help us work through that and let go, so that perfectionism can fall through on its own?
Yeah. That's something I struggle with every single day. The part that I finished with empathy, I think it's important to extend empathy to others, but most important, it's looking back at yourself and giving yourself empathy. So while your perfectionism and control takes over, I personally have been really working to give myself that break and then really reflect on me for a second and say, like, it's okay, dude. Like, you don't have to get that done. You gotta get that done.
Great question.
I have one for Tony, and this is neither here nor there, but I'm a realtor. See, I wrote it on my name.
Oh, nice.
I'm shamelessly plugging now too. No, but like I'm fascinated. I love photography anyway, but and I've learned a little bit about real estate photography. But like all I could think half the time while you were talking about that is how did you ever get pushback from realtors? Like, we just need to sell the house, dude. Like I love your photos.
Well, that's the other aspect of real estate photography. Like I'm used to a process that is years long. Traveling, shooting, all of this stuff. And the jarring thing for me with real estate photography, I was like, cool, I'll get you these in like a week or something. Yeah. That's cool. And they're like, how about 12 hours?
Yeah, we need
You gotta sell this.
Yeah.
So even my process was even more refined as I kept going along. Like, I started in Photoshop editing every single photo, and then I was like, that sucks. Let's go to Lightroom and batch edit everything. And then I was like, even that's time consuming. So I was like, I was just running auto filters on things. And so it took my creative process out of it. And so that's where the composition and everything else started coming in.
Yeah.
I'm a big fix it in pre sort of guy. So.
But in my mind, I would think that's a good, I tell this to buyers, for example, who are looking for, like, it's a process of elimination, and if you don't like the house, cool, but at least we got something good out of it. So in my mind, it makes me wonder, like, are you grateful for that because maybe you did learn some things, whether you learn things that help you in your process or things that you don't want to do in your process? Like, are you still grateful, even though you felt like it fell out? And,
I feel like any experience that you have where you're learning or even able to manipulate that learning a little bit is a great thing to carry forward.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it's kind of that mundane, boring, everyday stuff that I think is the most transformative.
Yeah, William Eggleston again has just fantastic quotes. He's a crotchety old man now, but his main one that's documented is, "I'm at war with the obvious," and so that's kind of what I think about with real estate photography. It's like you walk into a room, cool, here's a cool table.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh yeah, one more. Yeah, let's do it.
We were laughing at your pie chart because it was super relatable. Also love a good pie chart. What advice would you have though for, let's say, the embarrassment sliver maybe is a little bit more than whatever you said, and like the 13% or whatever you had it as.
Yeah, that is a great question. I too love a good pie chart. Yeah, so like you can isolate those into each slice, right? And much like data, you can separate stuff out, catalog it. But for me, it's looking at the holistic thing of the data. So while embarrassment is 12.3% or whatever of it, there's also controlling, there's also efficiency and everything like that. And for me, it all kind of fits in there. The embarrassment gives me humility that I didn't put up there. It also contributes to the empathy. You know, being in someone else's shoes and thinking about how that's going to relate to me or how that impacts me. Yeah, it might be something new, and I may be like timid and like I'm gonna screw this up really bad, and you know, but looking more at the holistic approach, knowing that you have these other qualities that are going to counteract that amount of embarrassment is what helps me get through it.
Yeah, feel the fear and do it anyways. Kind of my mantra, I guess.